Hello. Hi, everybody. It's great to be with all of you here today at Snap Connected Women. Put your hand up if you use Google Maps or other geolocation apps. Pretty much the entire room, just as I thought. Now, who knows here that it is in fact a Turkish woman named Dr. Shireen Takanay who pioneered the tech behind these geolocation apps? In fact, when she first took up the work to work on these technologies back in the 1990s, they had to give her a whole new job title. Wireless Geolocation Technical Prime. It sounds like a superhero, right? But this was a job title for a job that didn't even have a job description yet. And so when I interviewed her, she said when she would go out and she would talk about the things that she was working on, she would say to people, thanks to these technologies, we will be able to travel to new cities and to find our way around without asking for directions. So this was more than 25 years ago. You can imagine people looked at her like she had two heads. Today, Dr. Shireen holds 9 patents. 8 of those are directly related to geolocation, GSM networks as well. And she is now the chair of the Global Engineering Deans Council. Just a year ago, we saw Her Excellency, the Minister of State for Advanced Technology, Her Excellency Sara Al-Amiri, leading the UAE's Mars Hope Orbiter mission into space, making the UAE the 5th country to reach the red planet and only the 2nd to do it on a maiden flight. Her Highness, yes, absolutely. Her Highness Sheikh Badur Al-Qasimi was only the 2nd woman and the first Arab woman to become the president of the International Publishers Association in its 125-year history. Expo 2020 Dubai that we have been enjoying and millions of people have been marveling at from all over the world has been helmed, of course, by the one and only Director General, Her Excellency Reem Al-Hashimi. You know, it's interesting because the Andalusian Muslim scholar Ibn Arabi famously said, he said, "Al-makan alladhi la yu'annath, la yu'awwalu alayh." The place that isn't feminized cannot be relied upon. And it's very clear that the UAE takes this idea very seriously. Yes, absolutely. And so it's really interesting because the achievements of women in the UAE, even in the Arab world, are actually quite astonishing when we look at them on a global scale. Because seeing women in positions like this is still the exception. It's not the norm. And then when we look at things like the marketing industry, media industries, we don't see this progressive vision for women being reflected there, and it makes you wonder, why not? Research shows that girls from about the age of 5, they start developing self-limiting beliefs and they start thinking that they're not as capable as boys, that their gender cannot be or do anything that they want. And this is often referred to as brilliance bias. And so this develops into adulthood and it becomes the unentitled mindset. So basically, we put these kind of titles and descriptions on boys that we call them brilliant, we call them smart, but we don't say that about girls. And so those who are not called that, when they grow up, they feel unentitled to those positions that are normally held by those who think and are told that they are brilliant and smart. Now, does anybody know why we have brilliance bias? Anybody at all? Okay. It's because of the stories that we are told. These are the stories that shape who we think we need to become in order to be loved and accepted. So let's take a look at what it is that we tell boys. We tell boys to go out, to explore, to discover, to experiment, to earn, to achieve, to master, to self-actualize. This is what we tell boys. What do we tell girls? We tell girls to be a good girl. Everybody got it. Be a good girl. And that is because, as girls and women, we are taught that our value comes from making other people happy. And I call that the good girl syndrome. Whether it's being the obedient daughter, be good to your parents, make sure you always listen to them, do what they ask, then you go to school, get the good grades, be pleasing to your teachers, don't make too much noise, don't be too opinionated, right? And then you need to fit in with society's impossible ideas of what it is to be beautiful and perfect. Make sure you're thin enough, make sure you're wide enough, make sure you look perfect all the time. Because all of that is leading up to marriage. Yes, I can see people mouthing it. It's there. There's the expectation. Make sure you find a good husband. And make sure you get married and you keep your husband happy. And make sure you'll have lots of babies, particularly male babies. Don't forget the male babies, right? And then, after you have the babies, make sure you bounce back to your pre-baby body. And then make sure that you're a really good mum. Be there for your kids. Make your family happy. It's so clear that women and girls are expected to serve. Have you ever thought about why Siri and Alexa and all of these other apps that give us whatever we want, they're always women and female voices? Because women and girls are expected to serve, right? And it's interesting because when we become mothers, we idolize the ones that are selfless, that give everything they have to their families and to their kids, where there's nothing left of them. We expect mothers to become martyrs for their family. They are held up as the best example of what it is to be a mum. Incredibly dangerous, but that's what happens. There's another reason why brilliance bias is so prevalent, and it's because women are often left out of history. It's his story, it's not her story, right? And so, does anybody here know the percentage of women represented in history books? Anybody want to take a guess? 25%, but pretty close. Here's what they did. They still analyzed history books even further. One history book, which had 819 pages, had a total mention of women that amounted to 1 page. Another one that was 1,000 pages had 3% dedicated to anything about women. Anybody know why we have March Women's Month? Do you know the story behind it? So this is why. There were 5 women who came together, most of them are teachers, who came together and said, we need to have a time of the year where we broadcast women's historical achievements, because they were getting questions from their students about the women's movement, and it wasn't covered in the history books. It wasn't there. So they had to invent Women's Month for this purpose. And it's interesting because another reason why you don't see a lot of women in history books is because there's an amazing number of cases where men actually took credit for the work and the achievements of women. And so they were literally erased from history. This here is Hedy Lamarr, an icon of the silver screen. But not just that, she was an incredible scientist and inventor in her own right. Her story is one of just so many. She actually invented a radio guidance system for Allied torpedoes. Yep. They showed it to the Navy. The Navy pretended that they weren't interested in the technology. And so behind the scenes, the Navy went, put a patent on it, wrote her out of it completely, and then they used that technology for a whole host of weapons guidance systems. But this is not the most important thing about Hedy Lamarr. The most important thing about her is that her work is the literal basis for all of our Wi-Fi, CDMA, and Bluetooth technology that the whole world would shut down right now without. But this is what we're dealing with. Today, media representation is where these stories are told, or they're not being told as well. We still don't see in film and TV and advertising the stories of women who are the experts, who are the pioneers in tech, in business. We still, in the default, we think about men in those positions. Who knows the riddle about the doctor and the son who were in the car accident? Who's heard that one? Very few. This is interesting. Okay, so this is how it goes. A doctor and his son were in a car accident together. The doctor dies on the scene, and the son is rushed to hospital for emergency surgery. The doctor there takes one look at him and says, "I can't operate on this boy. He is my son." How is that? How is that? I can see you going, huh? Do you know? It still amazes me to this day how many people don't get that, because we still don't associate women and mothers as doctors, as experts. These things are separate. They're still seen as separate. So important that we pick up. This is just one of the biases that we're still trying to break in this day and age. Now, who knows Manal Rostom? Hands up. Incredible, incredible woman. One of the most inspiring women that I have ever had the honor of knowing. She's got a string of world firsts to her name, including being the first Egyptian, not just Egyptian woman, Egyptian, to complete 5 out of the 6 major world marathons. She's also summited some of the highest peaks in the world, Mont Blanc, Kilimanjaro, you name it. She also established the most incredible global online group called Surviving Hijab to break the stereotypes around Muslim women that she was experiencing and Muslim women all over the world experience. She's pretty phenomenal, right? We agree. She's very open about saying that she is still not seen as enough by her family and by society because she's not married, she doesn't have kids, and she's over 40. And you know, some people are going to be in this audience going, yeah, that's the Middle East. This is what it's like, Muslim women in the Middle East. No. How many people here wear Spanx? Guys excluded, obviously. Anybody here wear Spanx, or at least know of the brand Spanx? Who knows of the brand? Yeah? Right, exactly. Spanx Billionaire, Sarah Blakely, she had a very similar experience. She didn't get married until she was 37. And she always used to get women coming up to her and saying, "It's okay, darling. It's all right. You'll find a husband. You will find a husband. It's all right." They used to say that to her. And she's like, rarely did anyone ever come up to me and encourage me to follow my dreams. And she says it's because of the limited opportunities that she saw her mum and her grandmothers have that drove her to become her own CEO instead of waiting for a husband. Now she's happily married, she's got 3 kids, but this is what's going on all over the place. And so it's because of these biases that women are not out there wanting to, really talk about who they are, what they do. And it's interesting because I'm a public speaker and a coach, and people often say to me, well, women just need to get more confident. They need to become more confident. And I'm like, yeah. But what is confidence? The first question that you need to ask yourself when you want to become more confident is this: who do you think you are? That question is critical, and I'll tell you why. Tony Robbins once said, "The strongest force in the human personality is the need to remain consistent with how we define ourselves." And so if we as girls and as women, we are being told that who we are is limited to pleasing others, that we are the support, we are not the lead, that we are not celebrated as the innovators, as a scientist, in tech, in business, if all of that is going on and we're not celebrated as mothers at the same time, then we can forget about seeing women in positions of power like this. If you can't see it, you can't be it. And I say here, mothers, it's really important, you know, that riddle really brought it home, I think. It's really important to say mothers here as well, because that's part of who we are. And we need to honor that part of ourselves too. Valuing mothers and motherhood is a vital part of breaking the bias. It is really astonishing to think the Apple campus, who has seen the Apple campus, the incredible like spaceship-like building? Yeah? It cost $5 billion to build. It has the most incredible 100,000 square foot gym, but it has exactly 0 childcare facilities. So it just goes to show you how far we have to go in embracing mothers and women into work, into the corporate culture, into tech. It's so important because still as mothers, we are asked to go to work like we have no children and to parent like we don't work. Motherhood is the work that holds up entire societies and economies, and it's really time that we looked at it in a way that we work with it and not against it anymore. And so it's really interesting because who here has had a big idea where you go, oh my God, that's amazing. I just thought of something amazing. And maybe it's a bit big and maybe it scared you a little bit and you were like, but I want to do this. And then you go and you share that idea with someone. But then they kind of look at you after you've shared everything and they kind of go, who do you think you are, like wanting to do this thing or be this thing? Or who do you think, who's been in that situation before? Who's had that happen to them? A lot of us, a lot of us. And so this is what happens, particularly for us as women. We have that sense of self, the brilliance bias, the unentitled mindset that comes in and says, you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you can't do this, you're just not enough. And we carry all of that with us, which is why before anybody else asks you that question, you need to come and ask yourself, who do you think you are? And you need to get really clear on the answer so that you can know who you need to become in order to create the change that you want to see. It's vital. Because the way that confidence happens is when you step into the power of your own story, the power of who you were born to be, and you own it. That is confidence. When your vision for yourself becomes part of who you are, that is confidence. That is how we get there. It's interesting. This is me, early days in radio about 20 years ago. I've been asked that question so many times growing up in Australia. Who do you think you are? Growing up, I didn't see women in the media who were Arab, who were Muslim, who had an Arab name, none of that. We didn't see that. We saw Muslim women, and Muslims in general, they were basically the terrorists and the criminals. That's it. That's all, the only time you ever saw Muslims, both in Hollywood and in real life. Muslim women were always portrayed as the ones who were oppressed, invisible, and powerless. The complete opposite of every Muslim woman that I had ever known. The Muslim women that I knew, they were incredible leaders who took inspiration from powerful female icons in Islamic history all the way back to the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, and beyond. I remember hearing the story of Khadija, radiallahu anha. Khadija was a noble woman, and she was a businesswoman in her own right. And she was actually the one to employ the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. And she saw him, she admired him, and she was like, he's an amazing guy. So what does she do? she goes and proposes. She proposed to him at the age of 40, and he was 25. Now, if 2022, we looked at that, we'd be like, she's a cougar. Right? Right? And it just goes to show you that age bias is one of the things we don't talk enough about with women. So they got married, and she was an incredible partner and support to him. He loved her for a quarter of a century until she passed away. And even after that, he kept sending food and gifts to her family and her friends because he never forgot her. Her story is just one of many. You could talk about as well Fatima al-Fihri, the woman who established Al-Qarawiyyin in Morocco, the world's first university. Or let's go back even further than that. Let's go back to the first ever known author. Not the first female author, the first ever known author. Her name was Enheduanna, and she was a woman who lived in the 23rd century BCE in ancient Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, where I'm from. And she was an ancient triple threat. She was a princess, she was a priestess, and she was a writer and a poet. So these are the stories of the women that I was inspired by. These are the stories that I grew up with. And it's the reason why I went into radio, because I wanted to tell those stories that were not being told. And when we did that, it empowered us to tell our own stories and to embrace our own identities as young Arab, Australian, Muslim women, and everything else that we were doing. We could tell that to the world. So important. So we need to flip the script. And it's not just so that we can see the incredible magnitude of the possibilities that are out there for women, but we need to do it so we can build the infrastructure necessary to see more women in these important and dynamic roles. We need to see those narratives of women normalized for boys and for men as well. They need to see those narratives normalized of women who are taking up these incredible positions in every area of society. But there's another crucial reason why we need to flip the script for men too. We teach our boys to be strong providers. We teach them not to be weak and to certainly never get emotional. But in teaching them that, we teach them that vulnerability is shameful. And so many men never learn to deal with their feelings. They learn that they have to keep them inside. Don't show any weakness. Don't show any emotion. And what that can do is lead to an incredible host of mental health issues, addictive behavior, and violence and aggression for men, the toxic masculinity that we see today. Emotions are there to guide us in our lives. Emotions are there as signals for what we need to do in our lives, what we need to feel, what we need to understand, what we need to process. And if we don't have the space to do that and to release those emotions in a really healthy way, it gets incredibly problematic, not just for that person, but for everyone around them, whether it's men or women. So the truth is, courage and strength cannot exist without emotion. And it is courage, it takes courage to truly be open and vulnerable with other people, because that is where love and connection happens, and that is where we can truly be ourselves with each other and be honest about who we are. And so this is where the media has a massive role to play, because we still don't take well to seeing men in non-traditional roles as well. So it's really important that we do see them there, especially when we need them. We need to see them there more than ever. If we want to see change, we have to change the way that we raise our boys. It's vital. It takes 60 seconds or less, if you're on Snap, to tell a news story and to redefine what it means to be a man or a woman in this day and age, in this moment today. And you know, when we're exposed to between 5,000 and 10,000 ads plus and endless snaps, stories, and videos online and everything else, we're at a critical point where we really need to be more intentional and creative with the stories that we are telling, because that has the power to transform the possibilities for both girls and boys to be able to change the culture and once and for all break the bias. We have to start talking about women and girls not in relation to other people. She is not worthy because she is someone's daughter, sister, mother. No, she is worthy, period. We have to start thinking like that. Now, in breaking the bias, I know a lot of you are thinking, okay, that's great, but what can I do? What can I do to break the bias? I'm just one person. Can I really make a difference? And my answer to you is absolutely. So let me tell you a story. My mother in the early 1970s, she finished high school and it was time for her to go into higher education. So she goes to the Institute of Technology in Baghdad at the time, and she wants to study engineering. And so there's like a whole host of specialities in engineering, electrical engineering, mechanical, and whatever. And she goes very specifically, she goes, I want to do building and construction engineering. And she applies. And they come back to her and they go, it's not for girls. Sorry, no. Building and construction, guys on construction sites, no, we don't do this, we don't offer this course to girls. Go and choose a different speciality. And by the way, this is interesting because there's that question again. It gets asked in different ways and you have to listen. Who are you? Who do you think you are wanting to choose building and construction as a course to do? It's not for girls. She wasn't having it. She was like, no, I'm not choosing a different speciality. I want to do building and construction, so I'm going to go and do it. So she applies again and they're like, okay, she's crazy, whatever, let her in. She stood her ground. They let her in. She graduated, the only girl in the top 10 amongst hundreds of students in that class. But that's not the best part. The best part of the story is that after she got in, other girls saw that she got in and they applied as well. They're like, what? We're doing this. Because they started to see the possibilities. And it is vital for each and every single one of us. So that is exactly what I want to leave you with. That change happens in those moments of courage where we decide to step into our story and to follow our purpose and to really break through those old limitations that have been set in front of us and to rewrite our story and step into our power. But more importantly, when you succeed, you never succeed alone, because it is impossible for you to take your gifts and go out there and change the world without influencing and inspiring other people to do the same. You just will. And so others are going to see that you are doing what they thought they couldn't, and they're going to say, I can, and I will. That is the magic of your story. Because when you understand the magnitude of who you are, the next time that somebody asks you that question, who do you think you are? You're going to say, stand back and I'll show you. Thank you so much.